So I'm doing yet another Teen Wolf review. This time, the second episode of season 6, entitled Superposition. I know I said in the previous video that I was going to be putting up a lot of the future reviews onto my personal channel, but after seeing how many views the last one got, which was surprisingly good for any TV and movie related stuff that we usually end up doing, I said, screw it, let's just keep putting them up. So I was going to record this on my laptop with a microphone instead of using my phone because I'm using my phone for this. But the issue is that I don't like the camera on my laptop, and also my laptop has like a fan that's not working, so you can hear the fan blowing in the background. But that's not what you guys came here to hear about. You came here to hear about Teen Wolf. So yeah, this episode deals with the immediate fallout of Styles being taken. And so, episode starts off with, mostly with, it starts off with Scott and Liam practicing lacrosse, because Liam's going to become lacrosse captain, in which I think in a lot of ways that's kind of like their analogy to him later possibly becoming the alpha. You know, he doesn't believe in himself and he doesn't want to do it. You know, he says, he's like, oh, I screwed it up. He goes, no, you have to actually try in order to screw it up. And so a lot of this episode is Liam kind of determining that he can do it. But the episode starts off with Corey and Mason working in a science lab, and then eventually Corey, sees the doors blow open and he hears something, so he goes invisible. And it turns out he can see the Wild Hunt when he's invisible. So he goes and he saves Mason in the library, and then they both end up being able to see a kid being taken by the Wild Hunt. And then the kid vanishes, but then they immediately forget that the kid existed. And so part of the episode is them figuring that out. And so, which I thought was cool because they brought up a couple issues from the last season, which was the fact that Corey didn't help during the fight against Sebastian Valet, and that gets brought up because Mason or Corey and Liam don't like each other, and eventually they work together to try to figure things out. And they go into the library, and they see a blank library card up on the rafters, but they can only see it when Corey's invisible. So he grabs the library card, and then they put it in the computer system, and the kid's name comes up, and then all of a sudden they start remembering who the kid is. So I think that's an interesting precedence to have, is that even though he's still gone, you remember people once you find artifacts of them, and that they're not completely gone, which I think is going to become important with the whole thing with Styles. I mean, that's essentially what happened with them this entire episode. There was a lot of banter between Corey and Liam, and then Mason. So I thought Mason was going to get taken for a while, but I guess maybe they'll hold that off for a little while later. But the rest of the episode is basically dealing with the fact that of the other three, and them not knowing Styles. So, and it's interesting because the route that they went, which is an interesting route that I guess is an easy way to figure out things out, is that things happened exactly the way they do, which is that they don't exactly remember. Like, Malia remembers that somebody used to help her get chained up during the full moon when she couldn't control it, but she can't remember who. And Scott remembers that he went out into the woods, from the pilot with someone, he just can't remember who. And Lydia remembers that she was supposed to see, meet somebody in the morning, and she was sure of it, and then she's like, I can't remember him, but and the big thing was like was the I think I love him thing, with the I think I love him line. And so you see her kind of having premonitions of like trains, which I found really weird, and like just her, almost grasping, remembering Styles, and then Malia's, doesn't have her anchor anymore. Styles was her anchor, so she's like, her claws are coming out. She's growling. She tried to turn her bedroom into a coyote den. And then the other thing was that she's like sleeping with a guy named Nathan. I don't know how serious it is. It might just be like a fling. I assume so, just because it would feel weird. You know what I mean? If it wasn't like that. And yeah, Scott's like looking at pictures, and he's like he ends up wandering out into the middle of the woods to where the pilot happened and him getting bit, and that's how they kind of come to this revelation. And because the episode kind of ends with like Lydia doing automatic writing, and she writes the word mischief over and over and over again, but it's made in a way that spells out Styles. And then the last line of the episode is she kind of comes to and she says, what the hell is a Styles, which is kind of cool, but then also kind of heartbreaking a heartbreaking callback to season one. For the most part, I feel like this episode was. I mean, this wasn't a bad episode. I feel like this episode was a little bit more filler. Like it was, it made Corey relevant, which I liked because I did not like his character one bit up until this point, and it was basically like the whole lead up to remembering Styles. And it's like I guess they haven't remembered Styles yet, but it's like I'm surprised they decided to go this quickly into trying to remember him, if that makes sense. Like literally they know that a kid named Styles existed and that he might have been Scott's best friend, and Lydia might have been in love with him, and he might have been Malia's anchor. And they kind of all know this, but it's like they don't remember Styles himself. They know of him, which is an interesting path to take. Oh, and then the last thing is that somehow in this continuity without Styles, the only major change is that Claudia's alive, which is the sheriff's wife. That's just interesting. Like that's like the only change that's like a major change, like comparatively to everything else, which I found interesting, just because it's like, oh, everything else is so like, oh yeah, everything happened the same way, except for that, which is just weird. But yeah, I just feel like this is kind of like a filler episode in a way. Like maybe they'll get to the point in the next couple episodes where things start to kick off. But so I mean, with the one line with Lydia saying, "I think I might have loved him," I mean, it basically confirms that Stydia is going to happen. Which here's the thing, I might have came off wrong in the last episode, which is if Stydia were to happen, that's fine. It's just that because of a lot of the Teen Wolf marketing, because in a lot of times Teen Wolf likes to use potential relationships to try to push marketing, and also just a lot of the Stydia fans kind of ruined the idea for me. And again, as I've said, I prefer other relationships. I mean, if that were to happen, they could do it in a way that makes sense. I mean, I don't doubt that they could. It's just that it's so weird that they're kind of making all this stuff known very early. It makes me think that something bad is going to happen. Yeah, so I'm curious to see where the season goes. They weren't kidding when they said that that the sheriff was going to like wrench your hearts out, and like somebody pushed the idea that after that, and I saw, because a lot of this stuff came out beforehand, like the line where they're in the woods where Lydia's like, I think I might have loved him, and the fact that Claudia was still alive and Malia has sleeping with somebody else. That's been I mean, those came out like Wednesday or Thursday of last week, and that kind of sucks because it's like, oh, this is all expected for the next episode. But I mean, what if Sheriff has to like choose between his wife and his son? And that's like, oh, that's so heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. But yeah, I mean, so they have the obvious out to remembering Styles. I mean, that doesn't really help with saving him at all. But last bit that I want to talk about is I want to talk more theory. So I want to talk about why the Ghost Riders are around. And so I'm basing this off of the connection between the Hellhound and the Wild Hunt. So Hellhound is in the book that Lydia read in season 5 are the protectors of the supernatural. So my theory is that the Wild Hunt kind of does the same thing, except whereas the Hellhound's more in a physical sense, like he's hiding the dead chimera bodies, that the Wild Hunt is more just erasing people who have knowledge of the supernatural. That's why Styles is gone. Maybe any of the other people who were taken, maybe they saw the whole thing with the Beast last season, which they also referenced how, Lydia's mom had to try to convince people that, what they saw in the school library wasn't exactly what it was. So maybe somehow all those people are going to be taken. And it's just like, maybe that's what their goal is. And the other idea that I had was, well, what happens when they figure out how to save Styles? I mean, I'm assuming it's not like you pop in and then you pop out. I'm assuming there's a door. So when you open that door, what if something gets out? What if something worse gets out, because in the super teaser for that came like after last week's episode for the whole season, essentially somebody screams no, and it's either Scott or Styles. So if it's Styles, so my theory goes to A, somebody sacrificing themselves, which is completely possible in the realm of Teen Wolf. I mean, like I said, we haven't seen Dylan O'Brien on set yet, and he hasn't. Nothing's been said about him returning for 6B, and also the only photos that we don't have too many signs of Lydia being around. The only signs is probably of her being on set, of Holland being on set. The only pictures is around the time that they were filming 6A reshoots. So maybe Holland. So maybe Lydia, doesn't survive 6A. I mean, that's the thing. I'm basing this off of, like, behind-the-scenes photos, which other people have been seeing. Like, we've seen a lot of Hayden, we've seen a lot of Liam, we've seen a lot of Mason. All those people. We've seen Shelley, we've seen Tyler, we've seen Lyndon, we've seen a bunch of people on set for filming 6B, but we haven't seen, we've barely seen those two. We literally haven't seen Dylan O'Brien, but we haven't seen Holland too much, so I'm just curious as to where that could possibly go. But, yeah, so, until more other stuff besides, because there's only a couple reviews left for the year, I think I'm going to be doing this every Tuesday, so don't forget, like, subscribe, favorite, all that good stuff. Check us out on Twitter at PluggedOnVids, Facebook.com/PluggedOnVids, and don't forget to subscribe. Check out all our stuff. Pretty soon here in the next couple weeks, all of our end of the year stuff is going to be coming up, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Lots of lists coming up, so yep, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you around.